myself first. It's essentially, so my name is John. I'm a co-founder of unpackAI, who's also kind of kicking off this session, kind of being responsible for this year. And what we're essentially doing is we're trying to make AI education as accessible as possible. We're providing AI education and AI and machine learning content. And today of these is one of those contents. So yeah, I'm going to lead you through the session today, and hope that you'll be able to kind of stick with me and hopefully also follow through and understand. Perfect. Okay. Okay. So first, let's talk about what natural language processing is. Okay. Natural language processing is a field in computer science, in linguistics, that is combining actually both. And it's able to use as machines, is trying to understand human language. And that is very exciting because once you can actually train and utilize machines to understand language, you have many different kind of fields of application. And you can see a nice visualization of NLP is the interconnection of linguistics and computer science. Okay, I already see a few questions here. Okay, cool. Yeah, feel free to ask any questions in the chat. I can see it and I can directly answer. Okay, so now knowing somewhat of what language processing is, it's something with machines and something with languages. It combines both. We can now dive more deeper into what it can actually do, what are the different kind of applications. And here, there are many. As you can imagine, if you use language, there are many applications. One of them is part of speech tagging. Essentially, a model or a machine analyzing text and telling you what is the verb, what is a noun, right? What is an adjective? That is obviously very helpful in education itself, right? You can automate the process of helping students who learn a certain language for them to actually understand what a noun, what a verb, what an adjective is. Okay, what else? Here's just a few examples where the different words are getting tagged. Another technique is something called named entity recognition. This is very similar to the first one. And essentially when a machine is trying to understand the text and it's trying to understand what each word or the main words are and what they represent. For example, do they represent here, for example, a name, a person? Here it's also org for organization, right? And it's very, very interesting how it can able to pick out what the different meanings are. And this is just something that NLP can do once you can actually utilize it further. Also, you can utilize date, right? Dates, persons are the most here, time, right? So very, very cool. Something else NLP can do is that it can answer questions. I'm sure many of you have used some kind of automated bot, chatbot, and it answers actually questions based on what you're saying. I also see that a lot of you probably have experiences with this, which were not necessarily super positive. At least that's based on my experience, but it was surprisingly good still, how well the model can actually, or how well the chatbot based on who's using NLP techniques is actually be able to respond and answer. Something else it can do is put two together: speech recognition, text to speech, and speech to text. Okay, it's essentially speak recognition is when you speak and the model or the machine is able to understand what you're saying. Okay, and this is put together because you're essentially talking. Now it's speech to text, right? You're talking, it turns into text. Then use natural language processing techniques, analyzes it, understands it, right? And then something after it's going to go also in text to speech. Okay, then can respond back, right? So you say something, turns into text, understands it, turns into speech and responds back to you. I think it's very, very, very cool because it's something that we've also seen. I think many of you have also seen in Google where you actually have a personal assistant. And this is something that it can do as well. Another thing it can do, which is also very, very cool, is something called topic modeling. Okay, it looks at a certain text, it looks at certain information, and it provides a topic. It tells you what the text is about. Is it about a project? Is it about expensive money? Is it something more personal, right? And that's also something that once the machine can understand the idea, the background, the topic, it can actually help you to filter, to change, and kind of like do some actions based on the different kind of topics. If you tell, for example, the topic, the model to say, hey, whenever there's a project, you should do this, then it actually can do very, very cool things based on that. So that's something called topic modeling. Something else you can do is sentiment analysis. Or here it's also sentiment classification, where it can classify text, if it's negative, neutral, positive. And this is also something that you can utilize, for example, for your Twitter comments, for your Facebook comments. How many of those are positive? How many are negative, neutral? And this is something you can use in many different kind of aspects as well. And you might have used actually, there's an application called Grammarly. Grammarly is helping you to improve your text, your written text. And part of what Grammarly does, it also gives you a sentiment. It tells you how the model feels, or how the text feels. Is it polite, right? It's actually fairly, fairly complex. And yeah, so Victor is asking, is anyone doing academic writing? So this is also interesting for people actually do academic writing, right? So you can actually do many things on your academic paper or whatever. So that's why actually for me, NLP is also very, very exciting. Anyways, so that's also that's something NLP can do. And lastly, something that most of you have probably seen before is that do some kind of translation. Ist es heiß? I took this because it's a German sentence, and this is very, very convenient for me. It's the input sentence. The model can turn it into English. Is it hot? Ist es heiß? Is it hot? Also NLP. And lastly, which is something we will be focusing on today, is something called language modeling. Okay, and language modeling is essentially when the model or the machine is able to predict the next word in a sequence of words. For example, you say, can you please come? And the word predicted is here, okay? And this is something that we will dive further in today, how this actually works and how a model is able to predict the next word. And you also might realize that this is super powerful because then you can actually write an essay, right? You can write an entire text because the model is always predicting the next word. It's going to continue. However long you tell it to continue, it will continue. And you can provide it initial, for example, you can start, hey, climate change is all about, and then you can see what text, right? So it's something we will be looking at today as well. Okay, so that is language modeling. It models language. And that is something we will look on today. Because if you think of language modeling, you will directly think, or someone who's in the industry will directly think of language models. And language models is doing language modeling. A language model is a model, it's a machine that learns the probability of a word occurrence based on example text, okay? It's essentially a model that is learning. It's looking at data, it's looking at a lot of words, and then based on the words that it has learned on, it can actually try to then predict the next word, okay? For example, the word it can learn on maybe it can learn a certain data set, and based on this data set, based on how the data set kind of was written, it can then take that and turn it into probabilities. It can turn it into data and can learn that and then actually also turn it to a language model. Then you can see stuff, what you see in Google is like, what is the best zodiac sign? Okay, this is also personalized. But aside from being personalized, it also do some language modeling. Okay, and it predicts the next word. And what that means is that it actually resembles how people speak. And more specifically, resembles what it has learned. And this is very, very important. So I want to stress it one more time. If there's a language model and it has learned on very negative, very, very bad language, very vulgar language, the model will resemble that type of language. That's exactly why you might have heard about a Twitter account being automatically or fully automated by AI. And that model, that Twitter account very, very quickly became very toxic, very angry. Why? Because most of the comments, most of the data it used to actually produce content was very negative and very angry. So that's why this actually happened. It resembled what it learns. And what it learns is the data it's being trained on. So this is one of the language generalists. And actually today we'll look further into a language model. And yeah, so what can you imagine now? Okay, I shouldn't have actually shown this. I should have allowed you guys to guess. But what can you imagine is the best kind of very wide, a lot of different topics to actually kind of represent human understanding, human common sense, human knowledge. And that's exactly what we've used, but Wikipedia was used as a corpus to train a language model on Wikipedia. And that means that a language, so then into this 2 billion words of text from a 2014 dump of Wikipedia. So this is super exciting, because then this model has actually such a wide and generalized understanding of text. Yeah, and that is exactly why we are kind of like, this is why the Wikipedia was used as a corpus. On the right, you can just see some kind of a visualization on how all these different words and all these different were kind of like how they were related. And here are a few ones that are actually sticking out. Actually, this, so you can see here, because what it does is actually that it looks at all the words and tries to put it in perspective. It tries to understand. And you can see that here are feelings. So this is kind of a mind map of how the words are sticking together, right? So body parts, head, hand, they were kind of at the top here. Cities were here. So it's all based on the Wikipedia. Okay, so now after kind of understanding the different kind of types that NLP can do, ending up with language modeling, being able to predict the next word, being able to understand what is being said, and then kind of looking at language modeling, which is the model, the machine, who actually does that for you to predict the next word. Let's now try to understand how a language model is actually able to understand words. How it seems so abstract. How is something like a machine able to understand something that for humans is so, there's a lot of emotions involved, right? So how is it actually able to put that into context and also see relations between different kind of words? And that is exactly when we talk about word embeddings, okay? A word embedding is a learned representation for text, where words that have meaning so okay, let's first focus on the first sentence. Word embedding is a learned representation for text. Okay, so essentially model tries to represent a meaning in text, and for example also other meanings who have different kind of who have similar meanings, they represented in a relationship way. Okay, this was a lot of words just now, I apologize for that, but let's look at some visualization here. This is how a language model is able to actually, okay, Arafat, you cannot hear me. I hope everyone else can hear me, but it might be about your audio.
That's John. Yeah, we can hear you very well.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so now we're looking at how models actually are able to understand words, okay? And that's when we talk about word embeddings. And when we were talking about word embeddings, we look at this learned representation of a model of words. And now let's go one by one here, okay? On the left, you can see a cat, okay? And based on the trained model, it sees the cat. It looks at different kind of categories here. One of them, for example, being living being, human, gender, royalty, verb, or plural, okay? And based on what it has learned, it can actually fit the word cat into this kind of representation, okay? And I just want to voice out here, for example, the maximum here is 1 and the minimum is -1. So if something here is 9, it means it's very, very much this discipline, very much this category here. So for example, a cat, it classifies as 0.6 living being, which is pretty high. Yes, a cat is living. Is it a human? No. So it's pretty low as well. And then you look at different kind of gender, royalty, and something, for example, which is more obvious here is if you look at man and woman, okay? And the model puts these kind of words into perspective by putting living being, it's pretty high number, yes. Actually, funnily enough, man and cat living being is the same amount, which, you know, is one more living than the others. I'm sure this is totally fine. If you look at the human one, though, the cat is 0.1 and the man is 0.8. Okay, so it's the man is more human than the cat. If you look at gender, it's 0.9, which means it's male, as opposed to a woman being minus 0.7, which means female. So essentially meaning this is a very nice representation of how a language model is able to see and understand words. And I hope this is something that the model learns. Okay, it looks at a lot of different kind of data, and it looks at every single word, and it looks at them in context, and based on that is able to produce a word embedding. And this is the kind of cornerstone and foundation of being able to understand a word. And then based on these word embeddings, it's also able to see some relationships between words. Okay, for example, we put this 7D perspective into 2D perspective, and now we can kindly see man and woman are pretty much related to each other, just like king and queen. Okay, so this is very, very important. Man and woman are related to each other similarly like king and queen. That makes sense. And cat and kitten are very close to each other because they're very similar as well. And dog and cat are like very, very far away from each other. Dog and houses, or I mean essentially, because it's also human, not a human being. So I'm just saying this is actually very important, because if you look further into these relationships, we can then also look something like this. Okay, so for example, a model then can put man and woman in a similar relationship like king and queen. But also, if we look at verbs, right, or if we look at tenses, walking and walked, right, it's the same verb, but it's different tense, is also being similarly represented like swimming and swam, which is also the same verb, but different kind of tenses. Similarly, language model will also take countries in capital, and through the work embedding, it's actually able to see relationships between these different kind of words. It's all about relationships, right? Because one word, looking at it on its own, it's pretty meaningless. However, if you see it in the context of a bigger text, and in this case was Wikipedia, you can actually see a meaning behind it. Because that's what words are, that's what language is, right? It's not just one word, you see an entire sentence, and only then it really makes a lot of sense. And that is exactly why these word embeddings are so powerful, because it's a probabilistic, it's a mathematical way for a machine, in this case a language model, to able to see sense in words. Okay, I hope this is more or less clear. I know it's very complicated, but I hope I was able to break it down. If in the chat, if you can send some yes, I understand, or no, I'm totally lost, that would be very, very helpful. Okay, I see a thumbs up by Shell, so thank you for that. Cool. Okay, so something just to further confuse you guys even more is that we utilize for something like this, right, where we have a lot of data, we're utilizing something called deep learning. And the reason I'm throwing this in here is because it's also related to what we at UnpackAI do, because we actually very focused on deep learning. In deep learning, it's a technique where a language model is able to do all these things we just talked about by utilizing neural networks. Okay, so it's able, the more data it has, the more smarter it becomes. And this is something where deep learning is a technique that is very, very powerful in natural language processing. So natural language processing is a discipline, and something like deep learning is very, very powerful because it uses neural networks where it can actually get more smarter and smarter with more data. I don't want to go too far into deep learning. It's just kind of something I want to throw in here so I don't forget, because it's also going to be very, very important for later. Okay. Oops, this was not intended. Anyways, okay. Because for today, actually today's also something very practical, right? The idea was to make today a practical session to build our own language model, right? With you guys, I want to show you guys how an essay could be written. And today, actually, the objective, what I want to show you guys is to build a language model that can automatically generate movie reviews for my favorite movies. Okay. So how we do that, right? Something that we just learned about is that there's text that is utilized to build a language model, right? We learned about here was Wikipedia, right? And we do the same thing here as well, right? We just use Wikipedia to train a language model. We will call this a Wikipedia pre-trained language model. It's a language model that we've trained on Wikipedia text. And it makes the model very, very smart, right? Because there's so much general knowledge in there. In this case, we just choose a smaller data set because Wikipedia, as you can imagine, is very, very huge. Here, just use 1 million token words extracted from good or featured articles on Wikipedia. So it's more selection. Okay. So now having done this, right, now we're thinking of, hey, we have now a model that's very, very smart, but actually our objective is to generate movie reviews for my favorite movies. So what we can do now actually is we can take a very smart, very intelligent, pre-trained language model and make it even smarter. And that is something we can call fine-tuning, okay? So on top, on our language model that we've trained on Wikipedia text, we can then also fine-tune it. That means we can train it also on more text data. And in this case, the text data we've chosen is a set of movie reviews from IMDb. A lot of you know, I'm sure you know IMDb. It's a very, very popular movie review platform where I think you can also watch movies on there. But anyways, the most important is that you can utilize even more text to make your language model even smarter. And this is all about fine-tuning a language model that is already pre-trained, that is already very, very smart based on Wikipedia text. And you make it even smarter for your own use case. In this case, for your own objective. And in this case, this objective is to generate movie reviews. Okay. And that is exactly where I want to show you guys. Okay, I actually have to do something else on the side here. I want to show you guys now where we can actually do exactly what I just said. Okay, I actually want to build that project. But before I go there, are there any other more questions on what I just talked about? Are there more questions regards to work embeddings, word embeddings, language models? If so, you can feel free to answer now. Ask now. If not, I will just briefly move on. Because it's actually very, very important to understand this before we further understand. Okay, it seems like there are no questions. Everything was very, very clear. That's great. Let me just do, okay. Okay. Also, I would like, yeah, okay, perfect. So now I would like to share our notebook where I've actually prepared whatever we just want to do. Okay. Ida, can you hear me now? Are you able to help me with this or not?
Yeah, just tell me how.
Okay. Okay. Have you been able to run the model?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay. Anyways. Okay. So what we're essentially doing here, we're trying now to make to write an AI write an essay for you. And essentially, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to firstly utilize data that we now need from IMDb. And this is something we can see here. Okay. It's very, very important for us to use text to now actually make our model smarter. In this case, we use, as I just said before, IMDb text. I already downloaded it for us to make it even quicker. And I have to see if we actually, yeah, okay. So now after downloading it, now we need to train a model, okay? And I told you guys, the model essentially is able to predict the next word in a sequence. So how do you train such a model? You would train such a model to show him one word and then let him predict the next. And do that over and over and over until it actually gets better at predicting the next word in a sequence. So here you can see actually on the left, you can see the normal text that I've gotten from our data above. And on the right, you can see text, and then there's a text underline. This is essentially the data with the next, skipping one word always ahead. As this, you can see here, this is something like this, and this already starts with I, which is the next word in the sequence. So this is our way to actually build a smart model and actually build a language model. Okay. Okay, actually, so the idea would now be to build a language model that can now predict that for us, and then is able to actually make predictions. But something that has happened before the session actually is that we have run out of GPU. So I'm not really able to show that in practice. Ida, are you able to run the model on the side and kind of show that maybe in the next 10 minutes? Then I can talk about something else first before we go on the practice.
Yeah, okay. Let me see.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I apologize about the delay, guys, but we'll get back to this. Essentially, the idea would now be based on our trained model, which we have trained on Wikipedia and on the IMD text data, we would now use that to actually generate our own AI automated generated reviews. Okay, how it would work in a second when we actually show it to you guys is that we have the text, which would start, for example, the movie Harry Potter is, and then the model would create a review for us. Okay, but this is something I have to delay because we've actually unfortunately run out of GPU here. So it has to delay a bit for that.
John, 1 second before like continue. If I will start running the model, I will kick you out from the Colab notebook. That just happened to me.
That's fine. Okay.
Let's not do that now.
Okay, cool. Okay, so before we go about that, guys, apologize again about that. Let's go about, I want to show you something else as well. So before we go back to our objective that I said before and kind of like look at the practice of how this could actually work, I also want to present you guys that part of what I'm talking today is actually very exciting, but it's also something that we want to allow you guys to do by yourself. So we want to allow you guys to build your own NLP model as well. And something that I will show you guys in a second, because something I actually showed you guys was just kind of something that you can also use for it yourself. And you can do something such as also utilizing the same model that I did with not even understanding the code that I just showed you and building your own kind of language model. An example would be what you could do for your own case study, for your own interest. You could build a model based on recipe data. Okay, so there's a recipe data set that you could use for your own use case, and you could utilize that model to actually give you recipes, right? If you want to ask it a recipe for pasta, then the model can actually help you to generate recipes for that because it is trained on top of the pre-trained Wikipedia model. It can also train itself and fine-tune itself on cooking recipes. In this case, it's a recipe NLG, which has, okay, let me see, 2 million recipes, cooking recipes. And this is something very exciting. This might be something interesting for you. Maybe you're Harry Potter fans, so you can actually scrape text data of the Harry Potter wiki and fine-tuned, again, your pre-trained Wikipedia model on top of that. And then also have it write articles for you or give you information about what you want to know about it. And if you're more into news, right, you can also utilize the New York Times Facebook posts where they have all the headers and all the descriptions, which is a big data set as well that you can use to actually provide and generate text and news-related data or text. And I hope, based on these 3 case studies that I've chosen for you, you can also see different applications, right? If you actually want to build your own essay, right? If you are into academic writing, maybe you want to fine-tune your model on academic papers in a certain industry. That would also be very, very cool, because then you can actually have a very academic language model that can help you actually write academic essays. What you guys can do, Mary Shell, would be very cool. What would you use a language model for? You can customize it to your own use case, because it's actually what we want to allow you guys to do. If you can just quickly chat into set, and everyone else as well, how would you guys utilize your own language model? Would it be for more casual, something like Harry Potter recipes? Would it be something news related? Or what kind of language model would you guys build for yourself in your own use case? If you have some ideas, it would be very, very cool if you can actually share those in the chat. think about a little bit. Also shows me that you guys actually understood what I was talking about. Very briefly. Cheryl, do you have an idea of what you could be building your own language model for?
Yes, I'm thinking about either academic writing, but then I'm just already thinking about, because you talked about scraping the text, how would you, do you have to worry about intellectual property, stuff like that? How would it work? I have a legal background. And the second thing would be if you would write, for instance, your notes. If you, I don't know the English word, sorry. You know, you have to write papers for work. You have to write the same type of papers over and over again. And the papers are needed to get approval or your project plan or whatever. It could be very interesting to use it for something like that.
Interesting. That's very cool. So you'd essentially, okay, so before I answer the first question, you'd essentially utilize company internal notes or data or documents that you can actually train them on. Yeah, that would be very, very cool case. But yeah, you're actually right about the copyrights. It's not just as easy to kind of just take everything, especially when you want to deploy it and allow others to use it. Something that's a very popular data set is also the Gutenberg books, which are essentially books that have where the copyrights have run out. So it's actually public content. So it's allowed for everyone to use it. But for academic papers, yeah, that would be actually something you would have to think about. So having a legal background helps there indeed as well. But yeah, I mean, if you want to use it for yourself, I don't think there's going to be a huge issue. But yeah, I know what you mean though. Cool.
And can you also, for instance, if the company has a SharePoint environment, can you get it from there as well? Is that how it?
And can you say that again?
If a company has a SharePoint on which is
Like
this
an
information?
API? Like, you mean SharePoint is a point where you can get data, right?
Yeah. So I'm talking from the user perspective. The different departments have all their information on it. Can you then use that information as well for this model, or do you need to have an add-on?
Okay, so if you really want to build a very highly scalable application, then you would have to build the entire pipeline. In this process, what we can allow you guys to build would probably be more difficult. You would have to download all the documents and kind of like collect them like that. So it wouldn't be as easy of just kind of like going to a day and just kind of like building the kind of pipeline. That'd be probably a bit more difficult, because the idea of actually of Unpack AI and our bootcamp is to make AI and machine learning more accessible in the sense that you can use it for yourself. And these would be the limitations of that. But still, I mean, you can find ways to kind of like simplify it for you to build a simplified version on less data. Cool. Okay. Okay. Yeah, be cool to have any other ideas. If there's someone else, maybe Moana, if you can hear me, did you think of an idea that you would think of to actually build your own language model?
As in, like, how would I use it?
Like in what use case? Yeah, well, like what data would you train it on or fine tune it on to actually generate text for you, or maybe essays?
Probably like what you said just now, essays, reviews, and as well as maybe working with financial data that are like kind of unstructured, maybe like stock behavior predictions and things like that.
Okay, so yeah, I think that's generally a good idea. Just when we talk about financial data, right? It's not really text, right? It's more like numbers, right? So then you wouldn't really utilize NLP, because NLP is mostly about languages. However, if you then, yeah, so it's mostly that's financial data and other solutions out there that we can also talk about. But for now, we've actually chosen NLP as a topic. If you're thinking of essays, what kind of topic would you want to write about?
Probably like any topics. I'm not so sure right now.
Okay, no worries, no worries.
Maybe topics that I'll be interested in. Yeah,
fair enough. Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks for that, Moana and Cheryl. So this is sometimes different kind of applications we actually want to allow you guys to build on. based on different kind of data sets. And how do we exactly, Ida, just a quick standard update. Are you able to make it work or not?
No. Okay, no. Because I thought you will show the Google Colab, right? Explaining the code and explaining the pipeline. And I told you that, you know, it will be able to train the model.
Yeah, I was planning that, but I don't have enough GPU. So if you cannot make it work for me, then there's no real point. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay. Anyways, okay. So how do we actually want you guys? How do we allow you guys to actually build your own model? So that is why we've actually built our bootcamps exactly around that. And with that, I also want to introduce actually UnpackAI a bit further. With UnpackAI, we actually make AI and machine learning more accessible for everyone, people who have and don't have a technical background, because for many people currently a limitation, right? It's a barrier to make use of these technologies. And just a story to kind of give you guys some background. This is actually me on the left, right? So it's my team, of my past company, where I was trying to build an AI product. And I also didn't have an AI background. I had a business background. So for me, it's actually very difficult to do that. We had very tough communication between me and my team, simply because I had no idea what I was doing. And at that time I was trying to get into AI and machine learning. How was very, very difficult. There was a lot of content. I didn't know where to start and where to stop. I was studying alone, so I mean, you probably know that yourself. You start these self-study courses and then you stop. And obviously you have to invest time and money, which is very, very difficult. So this is exactly why we have built our student deployment AI education platform for people with and without a tech background. Because what we do is that we take you from no programming experience to get you fundamental understanding of what is possible, and then actually we build it. Because it's actually not difficult to build your own AI model. What we have done is that we have had students without any technical experience build, was more focused on computer vision, so actually being able to classify humans or cars based on images, and they've all done it within 5 weeks. So this is what we're focusing on with our education model in our bootcamps. And what we essentially do is that our bootcamp is that it's a 5-week bootcamp. We go into all 4 applications. Today, for example, we talked about natural language processing, as you can see here. However, we're also diving into computer vision, tabular data, recommender system. And for each of those application fields, we expect you guys to build your model. And it's possible. We've been doing this many times before because we already have, we already have had about 15 different bootcamps, and we're obviously going very, very quickly right now. And what we do is that we don't, it's not a self-study course, it's a bootcamp where we study with mentors and students, so that we can discuss together, build together, present and learn. Because that is exactly the way how learning should be done. It's within a group. Otherwise, you just get lost track. And that's exactly what we do at UnpackAI. Because AI, I was saying, it's more accessible nowadays. It can be made more accessible, and it's mainstream. It's not a new tech anymore. Everyone is using it. Companies, academia, research, everywhere. And so AI expertise is not only required from software engineers in academia, but also business professionals. So when I say business, I say everyone who's not in tech, essentially. And that is exactly very, very important. That's why AI is actually now becoming more streamlined. It's why it's more important to learn AI and machine learning. And this was me actually after I went for our own education. We tried this on ourselves. And yeah, after going through it, I actually built my own models. I was able to better understand what I was doing, and actually got offered product management, AI product management offers, but obviously I focused on UnpackAI. For those that are actually interested, we can also send in again. I know you have probably already the link, but we're offering these bootcamps starting next month on the 11th of September, where we take you for 5 weeks. We take into different applications. There are 12 seats available. Generally, we have a schedule where we have 2 live sessions every week, one on Monday from 7:30 p.m. and one on Saturday, 9 a.m. We obviously have to look at all time zones, but we normally make it work. And we expect every student to at least invest 10 hours of the time every single week. And it's a class size of 12 students, 2 mentors, and that's essentially the format of our entire bootcamp. And we tried to price as low as possible as we could to still make ourselves stay live. And so we got to a price of $259. And I think that's very, very cheap still for such a bootcamp. But yeah, so this is generally the idea of what I wanted to tell you about when it comes to AI in our bootcamp. Before I finish though, if there are any other questions, feel free to ask. I also wanted to show again what we've failed to do is that this is kind of the framework in regards in how we teach. We obviously in the bootcamp, you can see, actually that's not even needed. You can see the different kind of steps and we kind of allowing you guys to understand the code, even if you don't have any programming experience. And we go through with you for all these different kind of steps, how you can actually process data that you have gathered yourself or that you've provided for you and actually utilize it to make applications and actually make predictions. That's something we've sadly failed to kind of do today simply because we're running out of GPU. But in general, that is how it works. And that's how we actually take all of our students through every single one of our bootcamps. Okay. So that is, Ida, do you have something to add on what I just talked about in regards to our bootcamps, if you're still there?
Yeah, guys, so UnpackAI have been already a year and we run lots of bootcamps. We have lots of experience with teaching you guys. And it's kind of exciting for us, to host more and more webinars like this. And in regards to the run out of GPU that sometimes happen, because John was trying to train a very cool model, which is super heavy and requires lots of computation. However, for you guys in our bootcamp, we limit, to all these pitfalls that you might have. But John was like really trying figure out a very cool model for you guys to present. Apologize for this on our side.
Yeah, okay. Does anyone have any questions in regards to the NLP presentation that I made or in regards to any of our bootcamps that we've just kind of presented? Unfortunately, I cannot really see the YouTube. Okay, actually can. Okay. I'm actually going to try to open the YouTube live stream as well to see if there have been any questions on that side. But is there any questions on the Zoom? On the Zoom or the YouTube?
On our side.
Okay.
Yeah.
When?
Okay. Anyone have any?
Oh God. Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions in who's kind of partly in this session? Okay. Yeah. So I think with that, we can cut it a bit short again. That's our fault. But I think in general, I hope I was able to make the idea of how natural language processing can be made work and how it can be applied into real life situations. So yeah, I think with that, if there are no other questions, I thank you for guys attending. Have a good Thursday day. Have a good Thursday. In China right now, I'm based in China. It's evening, so in China we'll have a good Thursday evening. And for everyone else, have a good day, and I hope to stay in touch with you. And yeah, I think you have the links over China admissions. You can look for the UnpackAI Bootcamp, and you will be able to see it as well on the course side. So if you just want to apply, feel free to attend. We're excited for you. And yeah, I think that's it for today. So thanks everyone for attending. Have a good evening, and bye, and have a good evening. Bye, Cheryl. Bye-bye. Bye, Moana.